My name is Summer. We're going to get started now. Thank you for being patient. We just waited a couple minutes for people who are running a bit late. But thank you very much for joining us for wherever you're from. Hello and welcome. I'm going to share my screen and our presentation will begin. Again, thank you very much for everybody who is here. All right, can everybody see my screen? Is this good?
Yes.
All right, perfect. Okay, well, welcome everyone to the Youth for Intercultural Understanding second virtual symposium. Thank everybody for joining us, sponsored by Global Youth Philanthropy. My name is Summer Sun. I'm a high school student in California. So just quickly going over our agenda so you guys know what to expect today. Actually, right now, it'd be great if you could introduce yourself in the chat. So like for me, I would say, I'll do it right now with you guys. I'll say, I am a high school student from California, US. There we go. So there we go. My introduction's in the chat. If you're a college student from Tokyo, Japan, you can write that too. But I think it's a nice way to get you guys to know each other. And also, if you guys are comfortable with turning on your cameras, that would also be wonderful because seeing your face is better than a little name on a screen. Next, we're going to have an introduction for our Global Youth Philanthropy and Youth for Intercultural Understanding virtual symposium. It's a mouthful. And then I'll introduce our guest speaker, Eureka Terui. And finally, we'll have a question and answer time where we'll get to discuss our thoughts. But in the meantime, please keep those introductions flowing in. Don't be shy. I want to know who you guys are and where you guys are from. All right. Make sure to keep. So GYP is short for Global Youth Philanthropy. It's a nonprofit organization, and it's President's Volunteer Service Award certified. We help youth turn their passion and ideas into innovative philanthropic projects through coaching and connecting them to needed resources. We help young students gain larger world perspectives and leadership through volunteering experiences. And we also promote collaboration and communication among young philanthropic organizations around the world. Objectives and impacts of this event specifically, the Youth for Intercultural Understanding monthly symposium. We provide opportunities for youth to familiarize themselves with diverse cultures and traditions around the world. We promote respect, understanding, and appreciation for cultural diversity, building human connection, communication, and compassion. And this is all toward helping develop an intercultural culture of competence, global citizenship, and leadership, all working towards a culture of peace. So at the end of this meeting, what's in it for you guys, right? Besides learning about a beautiful culture that maybe you guys didn't know much about it before, you're going to receive a GYP Certificate of Participation for Cultural Competence, and you also get the amazing opportunity to publish and submit your reflections and opinions on blogs so people can read them from all over the world. And if you're interested, you can also email this email right here, the Youth for Intercultural Symposium at yahoo.com. And also, you guys can become a guest speaker at future symposiums if you guys want to talk about a cultural you feel qualified to talk about. A quick preview for our third Intercultural Symposium. This is our second one. Our next speaker will be Jean Michoud. He's going to talk about Haitian culture and modern life, and it's going to be on the 23rd. So also, please scan this WeChat code. I know I can't see you guys, but please take out your phones right now. I have mine right here, so I can scan it right here and join this group chat. And the reason why joining this group chat is very important is because if you want to get their certificate and you want to learn about blog information or become a future speaker, it's really important that you scan this code right here so that we can send you the information that you need to do that. So please, I know I can't see you, but take out your phones and join the group chat right now. Yes. All right, and quickly, just a quick overview about GYP's current programs. If you are in the East Coast by any chance this summer or this fall, there is a 2022 Boston Students Art Show that you don't want to miss from July to September 2022. And also, if coding is more your thing, not really art, maybe you can join the Summer AI Coding Camp, which is also going to be July and August of this year. All right, now to the good stuff. We're going to move on to Eureka Terui. So Eureka is our guest speaker today. She's a Japanese American incoming college freshman. And before she introduces herself, I just want to quickly talk about her. She's a graduating senior at Newton North, which is in the East Coast, who identifies as Japanese American, and her entire family is from and lives in Japan, and she's a proud dual citizen, which is so cool, and a bilingual speaker. And at her high school, she serves on the Human Rights Council and is involved with various AAPI affinity groups. And outside of school, she's both the founder and the director of Boston Secure Kids, a volunteer organization that teaches Japanese and English to elementary school kids. And also, she is a recent graduate of the Japanese Language School of Greater Boston, which she attended for 14 years, which is crazy. And also, just personally, from my time of getting to know Eureka over Zoom and talking, she's a very kind person, and I'm so excited to hear her talk about Japanese culture. And at this point, I am now going to hand the mic over to her and her amazing presentation, and we will get started.
Hi everyone, so as Summer introduced, my name is Eureka. I use she, her pronouns. I am a recently graduated high school senior and incoming college freshman, which is a little wild to think about, but definitely excited. So today I'll be giving a presentation on Japanese culture. So if you could move on to the next slide, please. So just as an overview, what is Japan? So Japan is a country with over 30,000 years of history. So it's a very old country. There are very, very rich cultures. So as you can see, Japan has 25 UNESCO World Heritage Sites and 22 UNESCO Intangible Heritages, which are basically like cultural traditions or practices that the UN has deemed to be valuable and worth preserving. And so Japan has both a really rich past, but also a lot of culture that's contemporary and modern. So today I'll be sharing with you all some examples of more traditional historical Japanese culture and also more modern culture that people today interact with more. And obviously not everything fits into those neat categories, but just for simplicity's sake, we're going to look at culture through those two lenses. So next slide, please. So first I thought we'd start with sports. So on the screen here, you can see 4 traditional Japanese sports. If you notice, they all share the same letter, do, which in Japanese means road or path. And I believe since Japanese kanji is based off of Chinese characters, there might be a similar Chinese equivalent. But this is pretty commonly used in sports and arts. And that's because in Japan, traditional sports and arts are practiced. They're like a way of living. And so they have a lot of significance besides just doing the sport. So for instance, there's Kyudo, which is Japanese archery, Kendo, which is Japanese sword fighting, which you do with either a wooden stick or an actual sword. Judo, which is a form of martial arts that you may have seen in the Summer Olympics. It's pretty popular. And then sumo, which is probably the most well-known and most popular in Japan, which is traditional form of Japanese wrestling. So next slide. Now comparing that to modern day sports. So in Japan right now, the most popular sport I would say is baseball or yakkyu. And so baseball is probably like Japan's national sport where people, so like young students will play in it a lot. So high school baseball is really big. There's a national high school baseball competition that's on national TV every year. And also like the Major League Baseball is incredibly popular. And in recent years, soccer has been gaining a lot of popularity, especially the women's Japan national team has won the World Cup before, so they're very strong and popular. And so a lot of kids will play soccer at school or with their friends. And then golf is also quite popular in Japan, mostly among adults and the older generation. But this picture here is of a golf practice center. So the majority of Japan's population lives in urban areas, like in the city, where they can't go to a golf course. And so they create these miniature golf courses in cities where people can practice. And so they don't have to go for like kilometers and kilometers to like go across a golf course. All right, next slide, please. So moving on with the Do theme that we have here, traditional arts. So Sado is a traditional Japanese tea ceremony where people learn how to prepare matcha, which is a green tea, and serve it to guests. And there's a lot of ritual with that. So it's deceptively difficult to learn how to do. And then there's also Kado, which is traditional Japanese flower arrangement. And so it's traditionally done by women, and people will learn how to arrange flowers according to the season and the occasion. And so there's a lot of emphasis placed on like symbolism with flowers there. Then the last one, shodo, is Japanese calligraphy. And students in elementary school and sometimes middle school will all do this at least a couple of times a year. And especially at the beginning of the year for Shogatsu, which we'll talk about a little more later, people will do shodo and write down their New Year's resolutions in a sense. And so it's very popular and again, it has a lot of symbolism behind it. Right, next slide, please. So Japan is pretty well known for their traditional art, but the modern art scene is also growing pretty rapidly in Japan. So you can see a lot of murals in museums or in the streets sometimes, which is pretty cool with more like pop, like contemporary designs. And Japan is pioneering a lot in digital art. So like programming like algorithms to create art or using like digital animation techniques to create pieces of art. So as you may all know, like anime and manga are very popular, and digital art through this form is helping to like move that forward. And then there's also a lot of abstract art that ties together more traditional art pieces and more contemporary themes. And so it's pretty cool going to a modern art museum in Japan. All right, next slide. So moving on to the holidays. So the four holidays on the screen here are the four major Japanese holidays. So the first one is a Shogatsu, which is Japanese New Year's, which actually used to be celebrated with the lunar calendar like it is in China, but now it's celebrated on January 1st. And there's a separate holiday for the Lunar New Year. And so on a Shogatsu, people will go pay their respects to their friends and family. They'll celebrate with traditional food that is meant to symbolize good luck and wealth and such. And we'll be touching on that during the food section. And so this holiday is by far the most popular and similar to Chinese New Year. Children will receive envelopes with money or gifts in them. And so that's always really fun for kids to gather from relatives. And then Hinamatsuri is on March 3rd. It's Girls' Day. It's a day that celebrates and wishes for the health and well-being of women and daughters, mothers. So these dolls decorate houses all across the country, and we eat sushi. And then its counterpart is Kodomo no Hi, which is traditionally Boys' Day, but now it's celebrated for both boys and girls. And again, it's meant to wish the health, well-being, and success of children, and we display these carp kites that fly. And then the last one is obon, which is kind of similar to like Dia de los Muertos in Mexico. It's called the Day of the Dead. And this is a holiday where people will go meet their relatives. And so it's a very huge family gathering. And it's a day to honor our ancestors and those who have passed. So we will make these horses out of cucumbers and eggplants with toothpicks in them, and our ancestors will be able to ride those horses from the afterworld to the living world. And so it's a day where it's a couple of days where we gather to honor those who passed before us and celebrate our family lineage. So this is, in a sense, similar to Thanksgiving in that it's a huge family gathering, but the emphasis of the day is on those who have passed. All right, next slide. And so Japan has also, over in recent years, started celebrating more Western holidays as well, but also putting their own twist on it. So White Day is on March 14th. And in Japan, on Valentine's Day, traditionally, women will give gifts to men. And on White Day, those men will give gifts back to women. And they'll usually give like white chocolate or marshmallows or little treats like the ones in the picture here. So this isn't celebrated in the US, but it's pretty unique to Japan and also some other East Asian countries. And Japan also celebrates Halloween, but unlike here in the US, it's mostly adults who enjoy cosplay who will dress up. And so Halloween is celebrated more widely with like Halloween themed snacks or foods or accessories, but there's not a huge trick-or-treating culture in Japan. And then the last major Western holiday is Christmas. And I believe like 60 years ago or something, when KFC first came to Japan, they launched a marketing campaign to sell fried chicken baskets during the holidays to improve their sales. And ever since, it's become a national tradition that on Christmas, people get a bucket of KFC fried chicken and strawberry shortcake. And so a lot of Japanese people who move to the US come expecting that Christmas is going to be a huge KFC celebration, especially because KFC is American, but this is only a thing in Japan. And fortunately, KFC in the US is not as great as it is in Japan. So not really celebrated much here. All right, next slide. So kids in the past in Japan would find entertainment through traditional toys that are usually made out of wood. Kendama is one that has a ball attached to a stick, and the goal is to get the ball either onto kind of the peg on the top or onto one of the plates on the side, and people will throw the kendama in the air and like twist the ball around. And so there are a lot of tricks you can do with it. So I would say it's almost similar to Chinese yo-yo in that people will learn and train all of these different theatrical techniques that they can do with the kendama. And then taketombo is a wooden like helicopter toy that you like rub between your hands and then it'll fly through the air, kind of like seeds on an oak tree. And then daruma otoshi is a fun game where you stack up these wooden rings that make up a doll and you try to knock out one of the pieces from under it without letting the top crumble. So next slide. And today, kids still play with those toys, but some other forms of entertainment include karaoke, so karaoke, which is hugely popular in Japan. There are a lot of karaoke cafes where young people and old people alike will gather, sing songs while eating, and having fun together. So that's definitely a huge thing in Japan, especially because Japan invented karaoke, because karaoke means empty orchestra, which is essentially what karaoke is. You're singing and you're creating the music yourself. And then there's also purikura, which is the Japanese version of a photo booth that has very, very heavy filters and photoshopping. So as you can see here, the faces here do not look like regular human faces, but that's kind of the point of purikura. And now you can use it on your phone as well, kind of like Facetune. And then video game culture is also really big in Japan. After all, Nintendo was created in Japan, and so a lot of people will play with like Nintendo DSs or Nintendo Switches, and they're pretty popular across age groups. Right, next slide. Now, in terms of more like theater, performing arts, and such, there's kabuki, which is traditional Japanese theater performance. Well, actors will wear these very theatrical masks and perform on a stage in front of large audiences. Rakugo is a traditional form of Japanese comedy where one person, traditionally a man, will give a one-man show. So he'll play every single character in the story by changing his tone of voice, like the way that he moves his body and such. So nowadays you can watch a lot of videos of Rakugo, and they're actually quite hilarious and entertaining. And then there's shoseki, which is just Japanese literature in general. Japan has a really long history of written works, and a lot of them are based off of true events. So Genji Monogatari, which is the tale of Genji, is based on a real family that existed called the Minamoto family that was really powerful in Japan hundreds of years ago. And lastly, music. So Japan has a lot of traditional distinct instruments. So this one that the thin rod in the middle is actually quite big. It's like 2 meters long. It's a Japanese harp. You'll hear a lot of music played on it. It's called a koto. And then there's also shamisen, which is kind of like a ukulele. And then there's a lot of drums and such. Now, next slide. Now, they're modern day equivalents. So the equivalent of kabuki in a sense today is anime, which uses a lot of the digital art techniques that we touched on earlier. And anime has become popular across the world, especially this one here, Jujutsu Kaisen, has become very popular. So instead of rakugo, people find comedic relief through variety shows, the variety shows, which are TV shows that include a lot of like guest speakers and such, and there's a lot of like flashy colors and lighting, and it's meant to be a very like amusing, so kind of like reality TV in a sense. And then instead of like books and such, which people still do read, there is manga or Japanese comic books. And then for music, there's a whole genre of music called J-pop, which draws influences from K-pop and also like US pop culture and pop music. And similar to K-pop, there are a lot of girl groups and boy bands and such that are pretty popular and have pretty cult followings. Next slide. Now, in terms of clothing, on the left, the kimono and haori hakama, these are two examples of more formal clothing that you might wear to a wedding or a funeral or a coming of age celebration. So as you can see, these clothes on the left have a lot more like fine designs. The kimono would be made out of silk, which is very expensive. And the cool thing about kimonos and Japanese clothing is that you can untie all the stitches and it stretches out to be one large rectangle. So in Japan, you rarely make cuts into fabric. You only fold them and sew them together. So people will pass on these pieces of cloth from generation to generation. And each time you would just unravel the cloth and then have it sewn back together to your size. So Japan has a very long history of like sustainability in that sense. Then on the right here, sode and kinagashi are the more casual versions that you would wear in day-to-day life or when you go to visit neighbors and such. So these would be made out of more of like a cotton, like flax linen material. Right, next slide. And so clothes that we wear today are called yofuku or Western clothing. Students will traditionally wear uniforms to school, especially at private schools or middle and high schools. People in the workforce will often wear suits or business casual attire, kind of like what you'd see in the US or in other parts of the world. And leisure clothing, so clothing that you'd wear outside of school or a work setting, tends to be very similar to what you'd wear in the US or Europe, but definitely on the more conservative side. And then a whole new genre of clothing that's been popping up is cosplay, which is where people will buy or create costumes that are based off of anime or manga characters. The whole point is to try to essentially transform yourself into that character. So this is especially popular among young generations. Right, next slide. So moving on to architecture. These are three examples of really well-known like landmarks and works of architecture that you can find across Japan. So you have Ise Jingu, which is a Japanese shrine. So this design here with the archway is pretty popular, and you'll see them. There's one like in the ocean, and there's ones in front of lots of shrines across Japan. And then there's also Kinkakuji, which is the Golden Temple. So there are a lot of temples that share this design with like the arched roofs and tiered design, but this one, it has sheets of gold plated all across the walls and on the inside as well that artisans would hammer out and place on like one sheet at a time. It's very beautiful and very expensive to keep maintained. And then there's Nara no Daibutsu, which connects to Japan's history of Buddhism and like Buddhism off branch religions and such. So there's a huge statue of Buddha in a temple in Nara, which is in central Japan. All right, next slide. So more recent works of architecture that you can find are mostly in cities. So there's the Sky Tree, which is located in Tokyo, the capital of Japan. It's 634 meters tall, which is symbolic because 634 is Musashi, which stands for 634, but also the old name for Tokyo. So it's, I believe, the tallest building in Japan. Then there's also a lot of contemporary buildings like the National Arts Center in Tokyo with lots of windows, funky shapes and such. And then over here on the right is the Tokyo Tower, which used to be the tallest building in Japan before the Sky Tree was built. And it was built as like a telecommunication tower, so it would send like radio signals and such. But over time, the surrounding buildings got so tall that the Tokyo Tower became too short, and so they built another tower that was even bigger. Right, next slide. So finally, moving on to everyone's favorite food. Japan is probably most well known across the world for its food. So I'll be going through them in slightly different categories than modern and contemporary because these make a little more sense. So from day to day, people will eat obento, which is a lunch in Japan where in a box you would have like rice balls or rice along with different side dishes. Sometimes you'd have sandwiches and such. So bento boxes come in all shapes and sizes, and they are definitely like the most popular form of traditionally lunch in Japan. Then inside these obento, you sometimes have onigiri, which is a rice ball that contains different pickles or different fish sometimes. And then konbini gohan just stands for convenience store food. Because in Japan, unlike 7-Eleven in the US, which doesn't have very nice food, to be honest, convenience stores in Japan have a huge variety of pretty high quality food that is honestly pretty on par to like a fast casual restaurant in the US. And so you can buy pretty affordable, pretty healthy food there. So people will often buy like breakfasts or even lunches and dinners or meals when they're in a rush from convenience stores like 7-Eleven, which is very cool and very nice. And then lastly, there's Ichiju Sansai, which isn't a specific meal rather than it is a way of eating, where the traditional Japanese meal includes ichiju, which is one soup. So that can be miso soup or another type of broth-based soup. And then sansai, which stands for three sides. So you would have meat or fish, different vegetables, pickles, preserved foods, and such. So this meal style is designed to include a lot of nutrients and a lot of variety. And you can switch out the things in it in hundreds of different combinations, so you'll never get bored. Next slide. So on more special occasions, we will eat sushi, which sushi is a celebratory food. So we actually do not eat it on a day-to-day basis. It's more of a once a month or on a special event, whether it be a holiday or birthday, for instance. And then osechi is the traditional food that we'll eat on Oshogatsu or Japanese New Year's. And what's special about the food is that each food has a symbolic meaning meant to wish good luck of some sort. So whether that's wishing for prosperity or wealth or like longevity, like academic success, each food has a specific symbolic meaning. And it's also put into these boxes and heavily seasoned so that people do not have to cook over a shogatsu. So the whole point is being able to enjoy this celebratory, like lucky food with friends and family, and really being able to enjoy that time together without having to prepare meals in between. And then on the top here is kaiseki ryori, which is Japanese fine dining. In Japan, kaiseki ryori is usually divided up into 24 seasons. So there's season for every 2 weeks. And the meals will be prepared with ingredients that are in peak during those 2 weeks. And there are 24 of those approximately throughout the year. So there's a huge variety of traditional delicacies that you can enjoy at very upscale Japanese restaurants. And then the last one is tai. So tai is red snapper. It's this big, pretty like ovalish red fish that symbolizes celebration because the word for like good luck or prosperity in Japan is tai. So tai is the same there. So a lot of times you would have tai for like a wedding or a graduation or entering a new level of school and such. So you'll see this red fish on a lot of celebratory dishes. Next slide. Moving on to street food, I know I saw in the chat that someone said they really like okonomiyaki. I do as well. We can start with that one. So okonomiyaki is a Japanese kind of pancake in a sense that quite literally means like as you like it. So the like dough part is potato based, and inside of it you can put like bacon, meats, seafood, vegetables, cheese, kimchi, even noodles, and you fry it up and put on mayonnaise and this sweet and sour sauce on it, and it's very, very tasty. Similar one is takoyaki, which is this nice, like fluffy dough ball that has octopus on the inside, and a lot of times you'll find these in street vendors in cities. Yakisoba is based off of ramen noodles. And so it's like an egg noodle that's stir fried with vegetables and either meat or fish. And then there's yaki imo, which is roasted Japanese sweet potato. It's a potato that's cooked at a low heat for a very long time so that the insides become really sweet and caramelized. And so these are especially popular in the fall and winter because they're nice and warm. Now, next slide. So, everyone's favorite meal of the day, dessert. Japan has hundreds of different types of desserts. So, the one up here, dorayaki, is a Japanese dessert that has two pancakes that sandwich red bean paste, anko, and more modern iterations of it sometimes have custard cream in it and such. So if any of you have watched the show Doraemon, like Doraemon, if you've ever heard of it, that is his favorite snack, and it is a lot of young kids' favorite snacks. So on the bottom left here is yokan, which is kind of like fudge in a sense. It's a very dense red bean dessert that you buy in these very large sticks, and they're kind of matte and glossy on the side, and you'll eat them with tea traditionally. Then on the top right, there's daifuku, which is a Japanese rice cake that's made with pound like mochi, so glutinous white rice that's sweetened. And on the inside, there's again red bean paste. So if you're sensing a theme here, red beans are a really, really essential part of Japanese desserts, and you'll find them across hundreds of different traditional and also more modern desserts. Like nowadays, you can even find daifuku with ice cream in it. So Japan really likes to keep on evolving their food. And then the last one here is monaka, which is kind of like a wafer cookie. It's a wafer with, again, red bean paste on the inside. And these are especially popular as a snack. Next slide. So I realize not everyone on this Zoom is from the Boston area, but for those who are, these are some examples of authentic restaurants in the Boston area and grocery stores that you can buy food at. You can definitely, the best place to go eat Japanese food is Japan, where you can find really good food anywhere you go, even in the airport. And if you're outside of Japan, I would say like the best way to find Japanese food or explore is to try new things, because there's a lot more to Japanese cuisine, as we saw that sushi, and you can find a lot of like savory foods, a lot of desserts, snacks, casual and high-end food. So I encourage you all to be curious and adventurous because you will always find something tasty. Next slide. So that is it for my presentation for today. Thank you all so much for watching, and now I'm moving on to any questions that you have.
Yes, so if you guys have any questions, thank you, Eureka, again for that you're very well spoken and very informative presentation. Thank you very much. So if you have questions, I'm gonna first go down the chat and read all the questions there. You can also raise your hand. So like on the Zoom, there's like a function you can raise your hand, so you can also unmute yourself that way, and maybe you can also show your face. I don't know, maybe it might be nice to see your smiling face. You can also just unmute yourself. So first, we're gonna handle the chat questions. So Eureka, asking in the chat, do some schools offer Shodo as a class?
So yes, a lot of schools, especially elementary schools, will teach Shodo as kind of a class like art or music. And so you'll have it a few times a week, and students will learn how to like write different characters. And you can also go to Shodo classes. So some people will go to like extracurricular classes outside of school to learn how to do Shodo. And there are different like certifications that you can get, different competitions you can enter. So all students will get exposure to it at some point in their academic career, but students choose to take it even further by practicing it outside of school.
Very nice. How about what are the most popular video games in Japan now?
Ooh, that's a good question. To be quite honest, I'm not really sure what video games are very popular in Japan right now, but I do know that a while back, like Pokemon Go was incredibly popular, and a lot of games that are popular in the US or in other countries are popular in Japan as well. So I know Fortnite and Minecraft are still very popular. Any game that can be played on a Nintendo Switch or the DS is pretty popular too, because those are like the main gaming devices in Japan.
Sweet. Okay, awesome. How about what food do you recommend that a visitor must try?
Ooh, that's a really hard question because all Japanese food is the answer, but obviously we don't have unlimited time. So I would say when you go to Japan, I would definitely try to find a good sushi restaurant because Japanese seafood is really high quality, and Japanese sushi in Japan is worlds apart from sushi that you'll find elsewhere. But I'd also encourage you to try to find little stores or stores in Shotengai, try street vendors, even walk into a convenience store because sometimes you can find like the most tasty foods in like the most unexpected places.
Awesome. Okay, and Catherine is asking um, whether there is any taboo when a traveler visits Japan.
Ooh, that's a good question. There are. There definitely are. I'm struggling to think of a few off the top of my head, but one that I do know for sure that I've seen a lot of people struggle with is mostly people who are not of Asian descent who put putting soy sauce on rice or putting soy sauce in miso soup is less of a taboo than something that's looked down upon. And then there's also, I think, like stabbing things, like stabbing chopsticks into food is bad luck. So there's some more etiquette things surrounding chopsticks and food in particular. But I think one thing to keep in mind when traveling is that like etiquette, especially in public spaces, is really important. So things like not talking on your phone while you're on the train, like giving up your seat for elders and those with disabilities. So showing courtesy is really, really important in Japan. And so just like being respectful and being kind and considerate of others definitely goes a long way.
Nice. Great answer. All right, so how about Caroline is asking, what's the main difference between Japan and the United States?
It's a good question. I would say, besides the obvious difference that we speak different languages and are on opposite sides of the country, I would say the biggest difference that contributes to difference between Japan and the US is just diversity in the sense where the US is a country made up of people from all across the world. And it's a relatively new country as well. And a lot of people come and go and intermingle. So there's a lot more diversity and variety in terms of subcultures across the country. Japan definitely has a lot of regional diversity, especially being such an old country, but it is a little more homogenous compared to the US in that people, there are increasingly more people from overseas coming to Japan, but it is mostly Japanese people, like people who are native to Japan who live in Japan. So there's a little less diversity in that sense. So that I really do think like has a ripple effect through other parts of society.
Thank you. Awesome. Our next question is, what is the most popular toy?
Ooh, good question. So, most popular toy, say, in recent years are iPhones, iPads, electronic devices, like Nintendo DS's, Nintendo Switches. In terms of more like physical toys, I would say Pokemon cards are very, very popular in Japan. Also, Beyblades, which are these tops that are made out of plastic and metal that you can like launch with this launcher and you like try to make sure that your top is the last one standing. And then also dolls like Rika-chan Ningyo is so Rika-chan dolls are the equivalent of Barbie dolls in Japan. So there are a lot of different types of dolls with a lot of very fine accessories.
Awesome. That is so cool. Okay, well, I think I've handled all the questions in the chat. But if you have any more questions, you guys, that you want to type in, feel free to keep doing that. For now, I'm gonna start taking questions from just if you guys want to just unmute yourself. You can also raise your hand so that I can see or Eureka can see that your hand is raised, and you can unmute yourself and then ask your question that way. So, yeah, feel free to unmute yourselves and Eureka will answer your question. If there are no questions, let's see, we have a question in the chat, Eureka. So, what would you recommend to bring back when visiting Japan?
Oh, that's a really good question. So for gifts, Japanese snacks are a must. You can get a lot of Japanese snacks at grocery stores or even at the airport. So surprising thing is that the airports in Japan have in the duty free section have a lot of gifts that you can buy. Say a gift that's especially popular are Japanese Kit Kats because you can find them in different flavors like sakura mochi, which is like cherry blossom mochi, matcha. There are a lot of regional variations across Japan, so that can be a really fun gift to bring back because people tend to be familiar with Kit Kats, but not with the Kit Kat flavors. So that one's really fun. And then I would also say Japanese stationery, so pencils, erasers, notepads, and such those are pretty lightweight and small, and Japanese stationery is very popular across the world. So I would definitely recommend those.
Awesome. We have another question in the chat. Keep them coming, you guys. Keep them coming. We have a question saying, how many states are there in Japan?
So in Japan, there are, I'm checking this right now to make sure that I'm not telling you the wrong thing. So there are, yes, 47 prefectures. So Japan has a system called Todofuken. So Todofuken are all different types of prefectures. So they're kind of like states in a sense. There's one To, which is Tokyo, one Do, just Hokkaido, the North Island, and then Fu, there's Osaka Fu and Kyoto Fu, so Osaka and Kyoto, and then everything else is ken, which is kind of like a state.
Awesome. That's amazing. Let's see. We do have another question in the chat saying, do you still have relatives in Japan? And if you visit them, what kind of gifts will you present them from the USA?
That's a really good question, and especially relevant because I will actually be going to Japan soon to visit relatives because most of most, if not all of my relatives live in Japan. And so when I do go visit them, a lot of times we'll bring like snacks from the US. So like nuts or chocolates, because those tend to be pretty expensive in Japan. We'll also bring back like clothes or toys from American brands or from like American like franchises. So like Disney goods, like Marvel, Pixar and such. We'll usually bring that back for kids. And then for adults, we'll a lot of times we'll bring back like American snacks, so like nuts, chocolates, crackers and such, but also sometimes like American brand clothing like Nike or New Balance or Adidas, because again, those tend to be more expensive in Japan.
That is really cool. Are you visiting your family later this summer?
Yes, I'll be visiting family this summer, which I'm super excited about because with COVID, it's been a very long time since I've seen them. So I will be enjoying all of the things that I talked about in today's presentation.
That must be so awesome. All right, next question. What is your favorite toy?
My favorite toy is probably kendama, which is the toy that kind of has like the cross made out of wood and then the ball attached to it. I'm not very good at it, but it's still fun to try to get the ball onto the disc. And you can look up kendama videos online, and there are these huge organizations that people will be part of where they'll practice kendama together. A lot of times they'll do it to the music, so there'll be a rhythm where they move the ball back and forth from the different plates and sticks. And it's pretty incredible because in the videos you'll see 5-year-olds doing it alongside like 95-year-olds, because people of all ages practice and play with kendama. Yep, and Japan enthusiasts, I think, made their profile picture or their background a kendama toy.
That's so cool. All right, again, if you have any questions in the chat, you can keep them coming. Again, another chance if you would like to unmute yourself. The floor is yours. If not, questions in the chat, again, just keep typing away. I actually have a question for you that I have, Eureka.
Mhm,
My family has been like planning a Japan trip for like so long, I can't even
mhm.
I don't even know how long we've been planning, but we're very excited to go in like the next couple years. Where do you recommend that we travel? Like, what are some of your favorite spots?
Good question. I would definitely say the must go locations Tokyo, which is pretty easy because most flights go into Tokyo anyway. I would also recommend visiting Kyoto. I would say that's the most like well-known historic city, and so that's where you can see a lot of the more traditional Japanese culture. It's like you can find different temples and shrines, traditional Japanese food and art. So I would definitely go there. And if you have the chance, I would also go visit Okinawa, which is kind of like the equivalent of Hawaii to the US, and that's a small island state that's to the south of Japan. Near, it's closer to like Taiwan and China. And Okinawa, I personally actually have not been, but it's beautiful. It's a lot more tropical than the rest of Japan, and it has a very distinct culture because it has a lot of influences from China and also other like East Asian countries. And so it's part of Japan, but it has its like own unique flavor to it. And I think the culture is beautiful and the beaches are beautiful. It's kind of like what you would find in Florida or in like the Caribbean. So very pretty.
That is so cool. Okay, well, thank you. I should look at the recording of this video so I can look back and like take notes. So we're nearing the end, and I'm wondering if I want to take a photo. I'm gonna go to this gallery view and I'm gonna take a photo. So please, 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 I want to see your beautiful faces. Eureka wants to see your beautiful faces. It's okay if you're lying in bed. I've been there before, okay? I did Zoom school and I attended a couple classes in the comfort of my bed. So it's okay if you are like doing the dishes. It's okay, like we're all friends here. You can turn on your camera, whatever you're comfortable with. But it'd be really, really nice to see your faces for this photo. So I'll give you guys a couple seconds to turn on your camera, and I will take like a group photo. Um, Yay! Hello, guys. Awesome. And again, thank you, Eureka, for this amazing presentation. You're very well spoken and just, yeah, thank you. I'm sure everybody learned so much today.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I enjoyed it.
Awesome. All right, smile, guys. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Awesome. And I hope everybody has a great rest of your morning, a great rest of your night, afternoon, wherever you guys are. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And thank you again to Eureka. Just amazing job. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
はじめまして、どうぞよろしく。